Hey there, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. If this is your first time, I'm Angela and I'm so happy that you've decided to check out this video. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that this is part 2 in this series. So if you would like to see the first video, check the links down below in the description box so that you can get all caught up, because last week's video was really good. All right, well, without further ado, let's get into this study. If you are depressed, if you are anxious, if you are hurting with really no answer as to why, maybe you're just one of those people who seem to always get run over top of. No one notices you. You're always expected to just deal with it, just handle it. No one considers your opinions or how you feel about something. And you remember I talked in the first video and I stated that you're not crazy, you're not weak. You're not just a machine with broken parts that is good for nothing and just worthy of being thrown away. You are a human being with unmet needs. But I want to add something to that. You also have a real live enemy who pursues you. And his goal is for you to fall to his demise. He wants you to fall to his voice, to his influence. And you guys, he disguises his voice as your own thoughts. And sad to say, but he uses the voices of others many times, the voice of a friend, the voice of enemies, of course. But too many times the enemy will get a good Christian brother or sister or someone that you're close with that will speak something negative into your life. But you know that voice in your head that hates everything about you. You don't like yourself. You are fat. You're ugly. Not good at anything. You're a quitter. There's all of these voices in our heads, and we are so hard on ourselves. I'm not a good mother. I'm not a good father. You can fill in the blanks. I'm a terrible coworker. I'm just never good enough. This is kind of a silly example, but I think we're all pretty familiar with it. And you guys, it's really not far from the truth. This video right here.
You're not just going to let him die like that.
My shoulder, Angel.
Don't listen to that guy. He's trying to lead you down the path of righteousness. I'm going to lead you down the path that rocks.
We can laugh at that because it's just a silly cartoon, but there's so much truth there. There's a true battle that takes place in our mind. So I want to read a verse to you. It's 1 Peter 4:12, and it says, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened unto you." So there is a trial. Don't think it's weird. Don't think it's strange that you might have these thoughts in your mind that fight against you. And then another verse, Ephesians 6:12, tells us that, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." We're talking here about the unseen world. And we're talking about evil spirits in the heavenly places, that are fighting against us through thoughts that we have in our mind. Isaiah 61:3, it says, "To all who mourn in Israel, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. In their righteousness, they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his own glory." That verse, that is what God wants for you. He doesn't want you to be overcome with grief and with despair, depression and loneliness and all of those things. You can fill in the blank, those negative feelings. That is not where God wants you to stay. I think that sometimes God does let us go to that place because he knows that good can come from it. But if we stay there, good does not come from it. We have to pull out of that place. Every one of us at some point in time in our life, when we face some trauma or grief, it will take you to a dark place, because the journey of grief is the darkest, hardest journey that we ever face in life. It's when we lose someone that we are very close to, and it causes us to react many times in very negative ways. But if we don't stay there and we allow God to pull us out of it, good things will come from it. I could sit here and tell you stories for hours of people that went through the greatest trauma in their life, but some type of organization was birthed out of it. Some type of charity was created so that donations could be made for other people in need. I could sit here and just tell you over and over, children who were traumatized by, parents that abandoned them as children to the point they pretty much raised themselves, who became, professional athletes or, became corporate business owners. And so good can come from it, but you have to determine that you're not going to stay in that place, that dark place wherever you're at. If you get determined that you are not staying there, listen to me, friend, you won't stay there if you get determined. So what does God have for you? He has a crown of beauty and joyous blessings instead of grief. Festive praise instead of this despair. He wants you to become as strong as a mighty oak that God himself has planted. And you remember I talked in the first video and I stated that, inside of each of us is a seed of faith. God has already planted something inside of you, but you have to do the things, watering it and feeding it so that it will grow into this mighty oak that the scripture is talking about. So, friend, today it's time for you to let God start changing some things from the inside out. When God changes you from the inside, people will recognize it. They will look into your life and they will see a difference. And they're going to ask you, where do you get that joy? Where do you get that inner peace? Because I want that. And let me tell you how awesome it is when you are able to help somebody else push through the trials and the struggles that you yourself have conquered. It is an amazing feeling. But today you need to let God in and let him help you figure out what's wrong. Let him help you figure out what traumas have caused you to have this inner turmoil. Let him help you figure it out. Let him help you figure out what is keeping you from living your best life. You wouldn't think it would be so hard, but for some reason, it's so hard to let God in to heal us. But I just want to encourage you, it's the best decision you'll ever make. So let me explain something here. One of the biggest things that keeps us from inner healing is the past. It's some past trauma that causes grief. Many times it will cause shame within us. It is some trauma that has happened to us in the past. Many times it's something that happened when we were a child or a young adult. So let me just share a little bit of my own personal story. My dad had abandoned us. He had got mixed up in an affair with another woman, and for whatever all of his reasonings were, he left us, and we really didn't see a lot of him once my parents were divorced and he remarried. My brother and I really didn't see much of my dad, and just being abandoned like that. I remember reaching out to my dad and trying to spend time with him and consistently being rejected. And it was just so damaging, just everything that we went through. The divorce was very traumatizing. It wasn't just one of those situations where your dad says to your mom, I'm having an affair and I'm leaving and it's done and over with. It was drug out, and there were devious things that were done by him and his new girlfriend, who eventually became my stepmom. And there was a lot of hurt inside of me, and I was angry, I was bitter, and I felt abandoned. And it was not until I got God in my life, and He was able to open up things to me in my mind, remembering the things and the trauma that I had faced, and then building a trust with God, seeing the things that He had done in my life already and the things that He had began to change in me. Eventually, I was able to let Him in, and He brought some healing. And I'm going to share a little more in depth about that testimony later on. But what I want to point out here is that during that time, I cried every single day for a couple years as a young girl. I felt like all I did was just cry every day because things were up in the air with my parents. And I don't know exactly what year my dad remarried, but up until that point, really, my dad would come back and visit. Sometimes he would stay for a few days, and we would wonder if he was going to come back. And it was just the up and down and the in and out. It was grief. And I didn't know that as a young person. So later on, when I was grieving the loss of my mom, I realized that I had grieved the loss of my parents being married, and I had grieved the loss of my father. And God had healed me from that. And so I knew a little more the process of grief, and I was able to let God in and let Him help me during especially that initial time of grief with losing my mom. Within those first few months, that first year, first couple years even. And God greatly helped me through that time. And of course, it's been almost 8 years now since I lost my mom, and nothing will ever take away the fact that I miss her so much. But God has been able to heal my heart because I've let Him. It could be trauma that has happened to us. Anything from verbal or physical, sexual or mental abuse. It could be a parent's divorce, the death of a loved one, betrayal and abandonment by a parent, by a sibling, or even just someone that you're very close with. It could be even financial disaster, being bullied, a breakup, and the list could go on. You could fill in the blanks of the things that have happened to you in your own life. There's a quote that I want to share: hurting people hurt people. And so when you see someone who is being hurtful, when you experience someone hurting you, that's because that person is also hurting. And their reaction to that hurt is to hurt. And what I mean by that is, if somebody does something wrong to me, my natural reaction is to lash out and to stop them from hurting me, to put up a wall, to say something mean back to them. When you do that, just know you have some wounds on the inside that are not taken care of. High blood pressure is known as the silent killer. Why is it called that? If you just do a simple Google search on why is high blood pressure called the silent killer, the reason for that is because generally there are no symptoms. And many times people die because they didn't realize that they had high blood pressure. Well, I want to help you understand something. Depression, anger, loneliness, anxiety, those are symptoms that are trying to tell you something. So don't ignore the signals. Don't resent the signals. Don't be angry that you've got these signals going off inside of you. They're simply trying to tell you there's something wrong. But when we're dealing with our soul, when your soul has been wounded and you've got that deep grief inside of you, you have to go to your Creator to get that fixed. You and I, we have a masterful Creator. He knows what you were created to do and be, and He knows how the wounds have changed that course for you, and He knows how to fix it. So I said, don't resent those symptoms. Pay attention to that. Sometimes that deep anger and grief within us, sometimes it's anger towards God. And anybody that I've ever heard say, I don't believe in God, I'm agnostic, or I'm I'm atheist. I don't believe, that is a person who has some deep trauma that has happened to them in their life, and they're wounded and they're angry with God and they don't even realize it. Well, some of them may exactly know what it is. Like, you took my mom or dad, they died, and I'm mad at you, God, and so I choose not to believe in you. And, I've had times in my life where I was almost there myself, where I was so angry. I don't have the answer as to why God lets some of the things happen that he does. I don't have all the answers. But this much I know. If I'm faithful and I run the race like he's told me to, one day when I step onto those streets of gold, I'm going to have all the answers. And God spoke that to me one day when I was going through some struggles of dealing with past traumas, with my dad leaving and abandoning us. It wounded me so much, and I just questioned why, because I had asked my dad and he gave me some answers, but I didn't have all the answers as to why. And I was just so consumed by not having those answers. And I felt like God spoke to me one day and said, daughter, if you can just wait, someday I will have all of those answers for you. And you know what? Honestly, some of those answers I've gotten now. I have some of those answers, but I don't understand it all. And I know that I won't until I'm in heaven someday. And you know what? I can wait. I'm okay with that. That answer that God gave me soothed my soul. I want to read a verse to you from the book of Job. It's Job 30, verse 22. It says, when I looked for good, then evil came unto me. And when I waited for light, there came darkness. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever just felt like you looked for good, you tried to do good, you did your best, but bad things happened? When I waited for the lightness, darkness came. And it seems like no matter where you turn or how you turn, something bad happens. But listen, if you don't give up, if you just hang in there and you just keep fighting, it will happen. Things will turn. Things will change. Your hope will come. And this next verse I want to read to you is such a great promise. Psalm 18:28. It says, for thou wilt light my candle, the Lord my God will enlighten my darkness. That is a promise to you and to me that God will bring light into our darkness, whether that's shame, whether it's depression, loneliness, abandonment, whatever it is, God will bring his light into those dark places. What I'm wanting to do in these videos that I'm making is I want to begin putting tools in your hands to begin bringing these inner griefs to the surface so that they can be known to you, consciously known to you, and you can then pray about them and ask God to help you and invite him in and begin getting healing. So I want to recommend that you go back, listen to video number 1 again. Write down some things that stick out to you in that video. Do the same with this video. If you haven't already, go back, listen to it, make some notes of things that I've said, scriptures that I've read to you in the first video as well as in this video, and write them down. I told you this in the last video. Write them down on paper and post them around your home, either on Post-it notes or print them out on the computer and post them around your home so that you're surrounded with reminders of the good things that God will do for you. Why am I encouraging you to put these scriptures around your home so that you see them and you read them? Because the first thing that really needs to happen is you have to start thinking differently. You can't continue thinking and living in accordance to those past traumas. See, what you may not realize is that you're making decisions according to those past traumas that have brought grief and wounds into your life. And you have to stop thinking under the influence of that. So stop thinking in response to the trauma or traumas and start thinking with a fresh light, a new angle, and a fresh perspective. And I want to read another verse to you. It's Romans 12:2. It says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Doesn't get any better than that. Perfect. So we have to realize that society's influence is not always good. First of all, in magazines and movies, videos, whatever, we see perfect people and we see perfect lives. We see women with the perfect bodies and men with the perfect bodies and perfect marriages. These videos and magazines are depicting life that's not authentic. And so then when we get married and we have relationships and, we look in the mirror, we're disappointed because we don't measure up. The fact is that real marriages have problems, have struggles. I mean, I can tell you, I'm married to an amazing man, but he's not perfect. And guess what? Neither am I. I don't wear a halo. And so because neither one of us are perfect, we have problems and we need God. So as long as we continue to look at ourselves through the eyes of society, we're always going to look at ourselves through the eyes of shame, because we're never going to measure up to that, because it's just not real life. I'm hoping that you will come back and join me for next week's video, because that's exactly what I'm going to talk about, is shame. Hey you guys, thank you so much for joining me today for this video. I want to invite you to return next week. If you have not subscribed to my channel, go down below and subscribe. Click the notification bell. I would be so honored to have you subscribe to my channel, and I would love to hear from you. So if you want to make some comments down below, offer any advice, maybe share a story or a testimony, that would be wonderful. So never forget that God has a plan for you. He's not finished with you yet, and He loves you so much. Be blessed.